Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us wherever you might be this afternoon. It might well be morning, so whatever time it is, thank you for taking the time to join me for the latest in a series of what we're calling EE Live Talks, in which we're taking a far more casual and laid-back approach towards engaging with our audience when compared to some of the other online events we've held over the past few months. EE talks on a huge variety of subjects, held every couple of weeks ago, always around this time on a Thursday. Not always with me, you'll be glad to hear. But for this one, alas, you are going to have to put up with me. And for those of you who've not joined us before, my name is Craig Turp. I'm the editor of Emerging Europe, a London-based platform that looks at a wide number of issues affecting the region we call Emerging Europe, but which others might call Central and Eastern Europe, or words to that effect. For the next 20-25 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about some of the developments in the global economy over the past 18 months or so, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, in particular the effect it's had on supply chains, and whether or not that has highlighted the need for firms, both large and small, to diversify. I'm delighted to say that I am fortunate to be joined by two stellar guests. Let me first introduce Professor Christopher Hartwell, who is the head of International Management Institute at the Zurich University's Applied Science School of Management and Law. Good afternoon, Chris. Can you hear me loud and clear?
All good.
Excellent, excellent. And joining us from Los Angeles, no less, is Yura Lazebnikov, who is the managing partner of TECHIIA, an international holding company originally from Ukraine, which brings together a number of businesses across the world, operating in all sorts of fields, from IT infrastructure to software development, integration, real estate development, merchandise manufacturing, esports, pretty much everything. It's a highly diversified operation, which makes him perfect for today's chat. So, gentlemen, if we can, kick things off, I think the first point that we should, probably talk about a little bit is just how badly were supply chains hit during, the worst of COVID-19, which we hope has now passed. Our TV screens, especially in the UK, which was hit by the double whammy, if you like, of COVID and Brexit, were for a while full of empty shelves. But, in terms of what it's meant for, industry in particular, what has COVID done to supply chains? Have things really been as bad as sometimes, it's been portrayed? Chris?
Well, you have to think that things weren't necessarily on an upward trend before COVID. Things were slowly unwinding in the global economy. We've been facing anemic growth for years that's been propped up by monetary policy. And then we had trade wars, kind of this resurgence of protectionism, which started well before COVID even showed up on the scene. So supply chains were already a little fragile. But then when COVID hit, you had this kind of exposure of everything that was wrong with supply chains in terms of resilience. You had high-tech inputs that were needed from China that couldn't get to Korea, they couldn't get to the US, they couldn't get to Japan, they couldn't get to Mexico. So, they're not getting to the places that they need to go in these kind of hubs of world high-tech economy. Like you said, the UK was already shooting itself in the foot with Brexit, and you saw kind of the problems it had with its food supplies in the early years, in the early months of COVID-19, because it'd been so reliant on this kind of just-in-time system, which again was one of those managerial techniques, which was great in the 80s and the 90s, but once it's been stressed, then we've seen there's been big problems with it. And finally, in kind of the food supply chains, one of the worries we saw at kind of the biggest points of uncertainty during the COVID-19 pandemic was the fact that there was hoarding, that governments were saying, no, we're not going to export, we're not going to send food, we're not going to process food, it's all staying here. And I think that was one of the biggest problems. Work that TECHIIA and I have done on kind of the Middle East showed just the MENA region, how much governments relied on this, especially in the early days of the pandemic. So these were major problems that came with kind of managerial techniques with just in time in kind of exposing the way how fragile this kind of hub and spoke system was. It hasn't been catastrophic, we found ways around it. There have been opportunities, I think, that came from it. There's been a move towards digitalization, especially in kind of the food sector, which is necessary. I mean, you don't have so many people working next to each other. You know, you've got this kind of learning, this adapting, and you have this kind of better focus on resilience, and you have a lessening of reliance on China, and maybe that's not too bad a thing.
All right, Yura, I'm going to come over to you. I mean, what's your experience been at TECHIIA over the past 18 months or so?
About what we've got in this year, about the supply chain and all the COVID economic, about the supply, different goods, and etc., etc. You know, I have a lot of experience in our different businesses, and what I can tell you that we face a pretty interesting time, especially e-commerce got 10 week growth that equal 10 years before, especially in the United States. Yeah, and if we're gonna talk about how bad for now supply chain works, we have to take in our mind that we've got a 10 times bigger e-commerce market for now. And if you want to consume all these Chinese goods in your house, and we've got billions and billions of people last year that stuck in their homes, and they get boring. And if you get boring, you're trying to entertain yourself. And it's easiest way to start click on the Amazon, some new sweets for your puppies, some toys for your kids, I don't know, some new knives, books, and etc. And of course, our economy used to live in some borders before. And then we got billions of people who are ready to buy anything because it's boring to not buy anything if you don't ask. Yeah. And it's not a disaster. It's not a catastrophic in China. China trying to produce as much as they can. But if you try to deliver all these goods to your customers in any country, in Brazil, in the United States, and for example, you send it, of course, via ocean, and ship come to a harbor, for example, in Los Angeles. But because we have a new restriction based on the COVID policies, you can't attract as much workers as it was possible before the COVID, because there are special policies. Yeah, they are not able to gather a group more than 5 people in one place, but you still get a lot of containers on the ships, and even more because a lot of people trying to buy something new for their kids' houses and etc. And it's something new for us because it's crisis not because someone doesn't have enough money. You know, it's not a crisis because we have low activity of customers. It's crisis because a lot of money on the market and a lot of people trying to spend it at one time, and there are no any tools to embrace it and this scale we get now. And of course we have different additional difficulties with chip shortage, for example. Yeah, and I don't know how it's going in Europe for now, but every dealership, for example, now in the United States, has their own market adjustment price for the car because it's chip shortage and there are no enough vehicles that can be delivered to the market. But there are market adjustment price, even 20 or 30% on every vehicle on the market, and customers ready to buy it. They're really lined in dealership to buy cars in the United States with crazy prices. Yeah, and I can explain for me why retailers, why dealership will have to decrease the price in the future if population ready to spend money with the current prices. Yeah, and especially for me, like entrepreneur, if someone ready to pay me more price for my goods and services, I will not come up with the idea to decrease it. Yeah, and maybe it will speed up the world economy. And I know that all this problem with the chip shortage, with all the semiconductors crisis, it's pushed world economy to develop some diversification, to create new factories in Europe, in United States, and Eastern Europe, maybe to get some less dependence from a Chinese and Asian market. But it's not a question of 1 or 2 days, because it's super complicated factories. And if someone will decide to build this new semiconductor factory today, it will be super cool if we will get these factories maybe in 2-3 years. And I hope it will be in this way, because I'm not seeing any factor that will decrease the consumers ask to the market to get new cool good stuff, and the business demands growing as well. That is my thoughts about what we have in supply chain now.
All right. I mean, coming back to you, Chris, I mean, Yura there, he's brought up this idea of, diversification. I mean, again, it's been something that's been talked about a lot, over the past year or so. We're going to see a rush of diversification, loads of nearshoring, loads of manufacturing returning to Europe, especially, our bit of Europe. Again, is that going to happen, or is it all hype? How do you see it?
It's going to happen. It's not going to happen yet. When you say that there's going to be this diversification, you're kind of saying that we're back to normal and that we realize what the problem was. And now we get back to our kind of regular planning stages, and this is how we build in the contingencies. Now we know. So
you're saying we've not realized what the problem is yet?
Well, the problem's not done yet. And I'll get to that in a second. As it's kind of, this isn't the new normal, but it's not the old normal. We're still in crisis mode, is what it is. Is that you have firms that, it's great that if people are willing to pay more, kind of for the cars that we just heard about in the United States, I think, is awesome. But I think that firms are still taking a very wait and see attitude to what their next steps are going to be. Because, realistically, what do you have? You have the Delta variant now is the bugaboo of the world. And we have recurring lockdowns. You look at what's happening in Australia. You have geopolitical tension, which you haven't seen in a while. Look at what happened in Afghanistan an hour ago. You have firms that are not just rushing to go out and invest. If you look at gross fixed capital formation in the EU over the past year, it's down. It's projected for this year to decline another 5.2%. So firms aren't investing. That's where you would diversify, right? You'd have to be investing in these new procedures, these new processes. You'd be looking for nearshoring and things like that. So uncertainty is still the watchword. You're going to kind of build diversification once you get out of the crisis mode. We're not out of the crisis mode yet. I also think that there's a lot of firms, there are specific sectors out there that aren't going to move into any kind of diversification mode, either because of the nature of what they're producing or because they've gone soft. They got bailed out during COVID crisis. They got bailed out beforehand, and they're just waiting for governments to bail them out again. The biggest one here has to be the airline industry. Now, avionics is something that's beyond my pay grade for putting things together, especially when it comes to any of the electronics or even the supply chains. So it's something that you have set producers for. But when it comes to kind of the customer service aspect, when it comes to figuring out routes, when it comes to pricing, all these sorts of things, airlines have been coasting for years because they know they're always going to get bailed out. I don't think there's any more resilience in kind of your aerospace, your avionics industry from after COVID-19 to before 19. So the rush to diversification isn't there yet. It's an amble. We know we need to do it, but it's something we need to do once things get better. And it's not evenly distributed across sectors, because some sectors, you think healthcare, you think, again, aerospace. These are ones that, I don't want to say healthcare has gone soft, and because healthcare has also had problems, if you're not specifically working in the vaccine. But there are places where you just can't have the diversification yet, or you don't necessarily want to have the diversification yet. There's no need.
Yura, I mean, do you agree with that? Do you agree with what Chris says? I mean, I know that, TECHIIA is, one of the most diversified companies on the planet, basically. I mean, how do you see this?
I'm absolutely agree that there are a lot of sectors that even don't have any opportunity to diversify the sector of economy. Yeah, but of course, like Chris mentioned before, if we will decide to do it now, we will get results maybe next year or even in few years. And of course, it's pretty good. It's very strong push to entrepreneurs around the planet. If you focused on one region and you have your all assets in some risky direction, you have to come up with idea how you can maybe to put it in different bucket. Yeah. And if you concentrate all your productions in Asia country, it's better maybe to think over about how to get some suppliers in Europe or in Africa, or it's better in Latin America because it's one of the most fast growing region on the planet for now. And for that part of our holding that focus on the content production, of course, it's not crisis, it's opportunity, because we're trying to diversify the content production as much as possible, but not because of crisis, but because of the high demand of the market. Yeah. And you can see on the Netflix stocks and all these companies that focused on the content for now, it's opportunity, but these companies which got a lot of funds and a lot of money from market now, they trying to diversify their businesses as well. Yeah, create more TV shows, some efforts to create live content, broadcast, and etc. It's why, because no one know what kind of crisis we will face tomorrow. Yeah, and now we trying to get rid of results of the COVID, and we're still in this process. And my point of view that you have to build your business and your business processes and not rely on one region, even such rich and prosperity region like United States, for example. If you will focus only one region, you're always in a high risk zone. And I don't know what kind of virus we will get tomorrow. Maybe it will be virus especially for Americans or something else, and we will get disasters here, and everyone.
I'm sure somebody's working on that, actually.
Yeah, sure. And we will be happy maybe to work in Europe with all this diversity of languages and cultures. And it's Europe. It's a pretty, it's a complicated region to business development, because it's United European Union, but it's a bunch of cultures, a lot of legislations, and etc. And of course, for us, for example, like for TECHIIA holding, it's much easier to work on the solid market with one language space, with one culture space, like Canada, United States, than trying to create 12 different offices in different countries with different culture bases and different languages in Europe. But I don't know what will happen tomorrow, and that's why now we're trying to develop our offices in Germany, in Great Britain, in France, and in Italy, because we have to be prepared to anything. And it can't even come up with the idea what kind of disaster we will get tomorrow. And it looks pretty interesting from the 2020 and 2021. I thought that the COVID, it's the worst case we've got last year, but then we've got all these economic disasters with supply chain, with semiconductors. Let's see, and trying to be prepared with the much possible diversification as we can create for us.
Chris, I mean, Yura just mentioned resilience there. I mean, is the lesson of COVID going to be that firms who do not prepare for whatever the next big thing is, whether it's a virus, whether it's God knows what, they are going to be the losers of this whole thing. I mean, you'd like to think that, management, especially in major firms, are already preparing for, the next crisis. They're not just worrying about the one we've got. But at the same time, I can't help thinking that there are going to be quite a few who aren't doing that.
Well, it's the same lesson that it always is. If you're on firm footing, if you have good reserves, if you have a stable either kind of stable customer base, or if you have good kind of cash reserves, then you can weather any storm, no matter what it is. There should be resilience. You build in redundancies. Yura just said perfectly, I think, about, if you're in one region, you're exposed. So this is the sort of thing that you should be doing no matter what. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, doesn't matter. That's the diversification right there. If you're exposed, all right, maybe it's a calculated gamble. Maybe you think that something can be done, but you over leverage yourself, and then things go south, and then you get bitten.
But do you think that this has at least helped to focus minds a little bit?
I would like to think that it has, but again, I don't think there's going to be the same kind of distribution, again, because we're still in crisis mode. We could say that, okay, we need to prepare for the next crisis, but we're still in this crisis. And then the issue is whether or not we prepare for the next crisis by doing the same things that we did with this crisis. Are we generals fighting the last war? And there's a huge kind of management literature. This is what eggheads like me look at. Kind of seeing what firms do, how do they deal with this kind of uncertainty. And I think one of the biggest issues that's come up here, and I mentioned it before with kind of these recurring lockdowns and what's going on, is the political uncertainty and the realization that who is the political leader in a particular jurisdiction means a lot for how much you're going to be prohibited from having economic activity. And the question is then, is this the new innovation? And how do you prepare then for the populist? How do you prepare for the protectionist? How do you prepare for the governor who wants to lock everything down? How do you prepare for the governor who wants to build regional quarantine facilities outside the airport? How do you deal with that? And then we've seen that firms can do a lot of different things to kind of deal with this political uncertainty. You kind of curry favor with the regime. You can go woke. But the joke is, you go woke, you go broke, because you've just alienated half of your customer base. You can hide out and not do anything. There's actually a lot of evidence that firms react to political uncertainty by just reducing the amount of information they give out to investors. Oh yeah, things are fine. Or you keep a lower profile and you do exactly the opposite, which is what we were just saying is a good way to kind of prepare for a crisis. Like I said, you have a cash cushion. Well, if it's political uncertainty, the lesson is do the other thing. Because if you've got just cash reserves sitting around, then you're ready for any demagogue and populist to come and say, oh, you're holding that money, you should be distributing it. And there's evidence that firms, especially even in the US around elections, they push money out the door in terms of dividends because they don't want to be seen as a target. So yes, I would hope that people are learning the lessons from this specific pandemic. Unfortunately, some of the lessons from this pandemic could contradict some of the lessons that you would think are necessary in crisis management anyway. So it's a difficult place to be in. Yura, I don't envy the situation you're in right now.
Well, Yura, I mean, what kind of things is TECHIIA doing to let's say prepare for the next the next big thing? I mean, how are you coping with everything?
Like usual, we started it not now because it's our approach, to attract different business direction to our holding, and we're trying to develop infrastructure in different regions. And from our point of view, we live in united economy, and the borders of the country, it's some stuff that we live for politics, and for example, we have our offices in Ukraine, in Brazil, in United States, in China, and for me, I just play with resources and with ideas to deliver the product the market ready to consume. And of course, from the geographical point of view, it's country, yeah. But from my point of view, like owner of the business, it's my united infrastructure, which works for the united economy of the planet for now. And I create some part of my product in Europe, some part of my product in United States, and then selling it to China. And now I'm talking about the content, yeah, for example, for media rights or the content we produce. And it's some production chain that we use that rely on different regions with different resources, but we can combine it every time. And I will get some crisis in Europe. Of course, it will be a little bit more expensive for me to create that part of content in Brazil, for example, but I will able to do it in any way. Yeah, and my customers in Asia will get this product with no any doubts. Yeah, and I'm trying to use this approach for all our businesses. And if I have some developers in one region, for example, it's focused on the IT industry, I'm always have option move it to other country or hire the new teams to support the guys that work in the region that have crisis now and they are not able to do their work. And we have our own outsourcing company, which focused on creating products for third parties businesses. And we have group of developers which we see it in different region in different countries to be more independent from the processes that can be happened every day in our new world now we live. Yeah, and I know that I really can't predict what will happen tomorrow. I know that as much region you can embrace with your infrastructure, you will be maybe more sustainable and more out of risk, because if something happen and the whole planet will stuck in one day, I think the business development will be the last things I will have in my head, and it should be really, it's super big disaster with some cosmic scale. But if we're gonna talk about what kind of crisis now we have, and what kind of crisis maybe we will expect, it will be more linked to some different countries and regions, maybe big enough, yeah, to have effect on the whole planet. But in our case, we build our businesses in different countries simultaneously to support this multi-region and multi-culture and multi-employees platform to be able to develop and move forward in any case. And that is our approach, how we're trying to do it.
All right, Chris, before we wrap up, I'm just going to give you the final word. I just want to bring it back to, the region that, emerging Europe deals with, Central and Eastern Europe, as it's, also known. I just want to, get your final thoughts on what the opportunities might be. I mean, is there a possibility of, this once again becoming, a region that, investors are looking to, particularly when it comes to, bringing manufacturing back?
Yeah, I don't see why it can't be, especially if there's going to be some more localization, if there's going to be more nearshoring, especially kind of within the European Union. The low-cost days are gone.
I hope so.
Well, they are. I mean,
I hope so, because I remember writing an article a couple of years ago saying that they were gone. So, I don't want that to look dated.
Been in the EU for 17 years. Poland was the only country that actually grew throughout the global financial crisis. These are well-situated countries. The days of them being the kind of the cheap labor, the labor costs aren't that cheap anymore, relatively speaking. On the other hand, though, if you're not just worried about labor costs, and businesses aren't just worried about labor costs, even though they tend to be the largest, bit of the bill. If you're looking for other things, especially as part of this new drive, either for sustainability or for resilience or for crisis management, maybe it helps that you're looking someplace closer. So then you're kind of trading off this absolute advantage for this comparative advantage where it's going to be slightly cheaper to relocate to Poland and to Czech Republic. And especially if China's going, Yura said that China's producing as much as it can, which it always does. And because it's being pushed to do that, that's fine. But I mean, if you can produce all you want, but it doesn't, if people aren't buying it, maybe you can kind of grab some of that business by having it closer to home. Some of the business that China is losing, you have the Czechs and the Poles kind of coming in. Now, of course, obviously the Czechs can't compete with kind of China's economies of scale, but there are areas in which the Central and Eastern Europe can compete. I think the biggest one will be professional services. We've kind of got EU level service when it comes to consulting and our financial services and things like that, but at a fraction of the cost. And I mean a massive fraction of the cost. Being here in Zurich, it is an order of magnitude less in terms of professional services that you can get in Poland and the Czech Republic. You might also be able to find things, I mentioned the food supply chain when I started, just because of a nimble use of technology. You've got, great human capital in the region that are able to kind of digitalize, learn, and adapt. The only kind of dark cloud on the horizon is that they've got to get out of this kind of government-directed innovation mindset, which Morawiecki in Poland loves. Orban probably loves it a little bit too, but he's more concerned about himself. The Czechs haven't gone so far down that route, and we got to get away from that the government can help innovate within the economy to grab these opportunities, because businesses need to be agile, businesses need to be flexible, and they need to be the ones that are kind of seeing this. So if we can get away from that, I think then CEE will probably have a good chance to kind of pick up some of this business in the post-COVID world.
All right, thanks, Chris. I mean, Yura, one final word from you. I mean, obviously, TECHIIA, you began in Ukraine. I mean, you're as well positioned as anybody to tell us what you think about this region. Where the opportunities might be for it moving forward.
Ukraine, it's not about the low cost for now, and I think like any country in Europe, it's not about the low cost. But for me, now it's money. It's not the main currency for the business, because time now it's cost much more than money and the funds. And especially for me, that really Ukraine, like a platform, not a country, can provide for businesses. It's a quality and the amount of professionals that can help us to achieve our business goals, especially in IT sector, much quicker than it's possible, for example, for Californian companies. It's not about the price per hour, it's about products per time. And when I have a team in Ukraine, I really can launch new application based on the new idea in 5-6 months. And for my Californian partners and friends, it sounds like something crazy. Yeah, how you can do it? Usually in San Francisco and in Los Angeles, it will take 1.5 years at even to establish the start of the project. Yeah, and in 5 and 6 months in Ukraine, based on the Ukraine developer teams, with your rep offices in Europe, in America, and thanks to that, you have access to funds and money, and you can spend as much as you need to finance all these talented guys who can provide their skills immediately. And this is the first competitive advantage that we have in Europe for now, in comparison with California, for example. And I know it's not only about Ukraine, it's about Poland, it's about Czech Republic, it's even about Germany as well, and of course about the Russian Federation. We have pretty pretty close, some education basis and the legacy of the skills we're trying to build a new project for ideas we're trying to come up with, and it not cost cheap for now, yeah. But as I told before, we can buy time. We can purchase a lot of time thanks to that infrastructure. And for IT business and for media business, main assets of our company focused in these sectors of economy, I can pay 5-10 times more to be able buy additional time and bring my product on the market faster than my competitors. That the huge thing that I can provide to the market thanks to our infrastructure in Ukraine. That's what I can tell you about how it works for now for us.
All right. Well, thank you, both of you for sharing your thoughts with me today. I propose we do this again in about 6 months' time, when we'll probably be on whatever variant it's going to be then, and we can see if we say the same thing or whether we change our minds about a few things.
Thank you.
All right then, gents. Thank you very much. Thank you,
guys.
everybody, for joining us, and I'll see you again soon on the next LiveOnEE talks. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day.